So, Nalini Madam, let's start.
Yes, yes. Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you all for our first webinar program on entrepreneurship and innovation as part of Institutions Innovation Council activities. Today, we have with us the guest speakers, Dr. Lakshmi Jagannathan and Mr. Ramkrishna. The webinar focuses on the topics starting a campus venture and my startup story. I welcome our principal, Professor Dr. Architect Chandran Rekha Jetty, to give a brief about our college IIC initiatives and welcome the guest speakers. Over to you, ma'am.
Hello. On behalf of Nepali School of Architecture, Planning and Design, we extend a hearty welcome of the day, Dr. Lakshmi and Mr. Ramkrishna. To brief you about our Nitesh School of Architecture. Initially, it was started as Nitesh School of Architecture and planning was added subsequently. And we had been venturing into many of the initiatives that were beyond our curriculum. Generally, we do not believe that curriculum of the BTU or AICT or ITPI or COA can limit our initiatives. So we went ahead with lot many initiatives, and in that direction, our faculty and students have made lot of efforts. And in fact, we started with something called a design book, a design idea book. And students were actually putting across their ideas in all their idea books. And that is the one thing that I'd be very proud to tell about, especially our final year students who went on putting their ideas, and when they came down to their thesis, these ideas were the one which helped them to actually come out with certain projects which were finally selected by the BTU even towards the funding them. And those in last week, couple of weeks back, they have actually presented to BTU, and we have sent all their nominations as well as their evaluation reports to them for the funding, and I think that will be moved by the BTU to the various other places like either MOE or probably to AICT for further action. In that direction, even our students, our teachers for that matter, have been working quite a lot in trying to make the students more innovative, which requires a lot of thinking. See, the thing is, from the current kind of an education system that we had seen till recently, until the pandemic, were more towards just book learning. But this pandemic has thrown a totally different gear on our students, where the students are required to think more. And because they need to communicate through the digital mode, lot of things they need to think more. And these were the things that were practiced by our students. And we got in December 2020, we had our establishment of our IIC. Though we have officially not inaugurated it, which will be inaugurated on 17th by the Professor Dr. Anil Sahasrabudhe and our President COA Habib Khan. This will be inaugurated by them, but we continue to go ahead with the programs on the in IIC, and our faculty, architect Soumya. She is the one. She has been taking quite a lot of initiatives in this. In addition to IIC related, we also have registered ourselves with MSMEs so that we can support our students in that direction. And that way, like I think both our MSME as well as IIC is quite working well. So without taking much time, I would request Dr. Gayatri to actually give the briefs about our speakers of the day today, and then we initiate with their talks. Over to you, Gayatri.
Very good afternoon to one and all. Welcome to our speakers, Dr. Lakshmi Jagannathan. She is the CEO of Derby Foundation and Chairperson, Innovation and Entrepreneurship Initiatives in Dayanand Sagar Institutions. She drives the entrepreneurship initiatives which she started and established on campus 7 years ago. She's playing a pivotal role in initiating, building and scaling up the entrepreneurship and business incubation initiatives at Dayanand Sagar Institutions. She is the principal investigator to many funded projects from government agencies. She has set up business incubators supported by Ministry of MSME and also Department of Science and Technology, Government of India. Through Derby Foundation, the Technology Business Incubator, she is actively engaged in organizing various programs and events on entrepreneurship and innovation to the various stakeholders of the ecosystem. As a very well-networked professional, she envisages to transform academic campuses to hubs of innovation and entrepreneurship. Welcome, ma'am. Our next speaker, Mr. Nav Krishna. Mr. Nav Krishna is the principal designer, founder, Browsing Designs. The company primarily works on UX and lighting design and has successfully executed 25 projects around Bangalore in 3 years. He had worked as a product designer in Memphis Designs. He also worked as a design engineer in Geometric Limited and Axiom Consulting. Welcome, sir. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. I think there's a lot of echo. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I think it's a good opportunity to talk to a bunch of architects. I think when Dr. Nalini spoke to me saying, I want this to be done, talk to our architectural students in architecture fraternity as well. So immediately I thought, instead of doing it more as a monologue, I would probably bring along one of our startups who's also done something relevant to your industry in which you are in. So that is how Nav Krishna also came into the picture, and that is where we started this whole envisaging today's program. See, what we will do, I think next close to about 2 hours is, I think next 45, 50 minutes, I will quickly take you through about essentially what is an incubator and what we've been trying to do the last couple of years now. And then request Nav to probably share his story of what he is trying to build, because his company is also something relevant to your industry in some sense. Right? I will just share my screen. Can you please enable the screen share option for me?
One second, I'll just do it.
Sure. I think by the time it is done, I mean, can we have a quick understanding of how many faculty are there in among the audience today? Probably raise of hand would help. Oh, okay. Sure. I think there are a couple of them as well. Done. So I presume I think there are about 5 to 6 faculty who are there. The rest, I presume, are all students of architecture, right? Okay, sure. Have you enabled the screen sharing option? I'm not able to share my screen.
Can you share it, ma'am? No?
No, that option is not enabled.
Just a second.
Yeah.
Now, ma'am?
Yeah, I think it's enabled now. Right. Yeah, are you able to see my screen? See the presentation?
Yes, we can see.
Sure. Okay, I think in the next 35-40 minutes, now what I'll quickly take you through is how we started building entrepreneurship activities on the campus. Probably that may also inspire some of the students, faculty to experiment what we've been doing, and how it grew to a full-fledged incubator as what Derby is today, right? I think one thing I would bring to your notice is last, I would say, decade or so, startup news in most of the business papers has multiplied multifold. Many years back, I think about a decade back, just about 1 or 2 snippets of news about startups used to be there, specifically in Economic Times or Business Line, things like that. But today, if you see, I think I would say at least 3 pages are full of startup news, whether it's a new technology they are doing or the funding they are getting and overseas market they are entering, things like that. And incubation and startup, I would say, is emerging as a vertical all by itself, as a new industry by itself. And I would probably start with the 2 stories of what has happened, especially with 2 student entrepreneurs whom I have mentored who are successful startups today. The first story is of Shanmuga. He was a mechanical engineering student in Dayanand Sagar, and whom I would say discovered by accident. We started our entrepreneurship center in, I think, about 2007 or 8. We started an e-cell primarily to encourage student entrepreneurs. I will throw some more light in the later part of the presentation on that. When we did this, we did a national level business plan competition to identify, encourage students who had ideas to strengthen their business plan. This was a pan-India competition. We had about 70, 80 entries. And the whole program, I think it was a 6 months run program. And to our surprise, Shanmuga won the first prize. There was a jury, a neutral jury, which did the whole validation, but this was a surprise. Then Shanmuga, I think, was in his 3rd year of mechanical. He was already running a company from his 1st year of engineering, which was into robotics training. And support, I would say, we gave him. He rose very well. I think graduated 3 years back. Now he has his own company, has his presence in 3 countries, has about 20 to 25 people in terms of manpower, doing phenomenally well, right? The second story is about Sachin Anchan. Sachin was a postgraduate student in Dayanand Sagar, and he had no idea of becoming an entrepreneur. He met me saying there is a competition which DST is doing, where they are encouraging new innovations to submit and see how they could be supported. So he came to me saying, ma'am, can we put together a proposal? I think this is where, students have a lot of ideas, energy. Translating that to a written document may be a challenge for some of them. So we sat together, made a small proposal and submitted to the Government of India. It was a Government of India program on identifying technology innovations which could have an impact on India, something like that. I think that program specifically received about 2,000 applications pan-India, and Sachin's was one among them. And he was shortlisted into the top 50. Then they said you should submit a presentation, specifically a PowerPoint presentation on what you intend to do. Then again, he came back. So we sat together, made this brief presentation about what is the solution, what problem is trying to solve, what is the technology, what is the market, and a whole lot of things typical to a business plan. Then he submitted, and he was shortlisted among the top 20 teams, which got a 3 months incubation program support at IIM Ahmedabad. I think there were a team of 3 people. One, he was from, of course, from Dayanand Sagar. There were 2 more from 2 other colleges. Then these people, I think they took their time off, took permission, and lock, stock, and barrel shifted to Ahmedabad for 3 months. All 3 of them were allowed to go through this program, which was a fantastic opportunity because they got mentorship from people of the stature of professors from Berkeley and Stanford. They got very good opportunity. That totally transformed Sachin, I would say. Somebody who was a real introvert to somebody who really started talking to people, communication, confident and all that, totally transformed. And today, if you see, I think Sachin started his company just out of the campus, never went for campus placement. He started a company which was into building customized tech solutions for specific industrial applications. Now, I think last time when I met him about a few weeks back, now he has his 3rd startup and joined with another person. And recently they've raised about 2 crore of first angel round of funding to scale up his company. So these are 2 inspirational stories that some of them, like Shanmuga, know specifically, yes, I want to be an entrepreneur. They identify gaps, have business model, grow over a period of time. Or somebody like Sachin, who probably the system creates entrepreneurs out of them. We have to only facilitate. So these 2 stories specifically is an example of how campus ideas or campus initiatives can grow into a full-fledged entrepreneurship initiative for most of the students. Architects per se, I feel you are always, the course or the curriculum itself is designed to make you entrepreneurs, right? So you are not destined to work under somebody unless you really want to. By design, you are made to be on your own from day one. So I think you people are ideal to get groomed to become entrepreneurs, do something really different. I mean, today, I think there's enough scope to do even in architecture beyond your realm of traditional architecture, because I know a couple of architects who have leveraged technology to build something fantastic. Maybe there's a company which has built a social ecosystem of the architectural community. Then there's another company which is building solutions for enabling green solutions, for building green buildings, things like that. So there are umpteen number of opportunities for anybody, specifically even in architecture. Now, primarily coming to the question of why entrepreneurship on campuses should be facilitated, be it from the student's perspective or from the faculty per se. Of course, for architects, the scope for intellectual property may be limited. But again, if you're leveraging technology, building something which has a strong IP, it may be a good opportunity to create something and probably file for a patent, number one. Number two, I think all of us know that being in a university curriculum, it is not so tight that you will not have breathing time to do something different. So it's always wonderful to try a campus initiative on the campus to see what would work, what would not work, and validate. Of course, you have a very good ecosystem on the campus, be it your professors you are there or people who come handle sessions for you, maybe your visiting faculty or maybe experts or incubators like us who are there, can help you validate whether what I'm trying to build, is it fine? Will the idea work? Is there a commercial viability in what I'm trying to build, right? Of course, placements, I don't know, because not many architects really look for placements, or not many architectural firms also come to campuses for absorbing students as a placement opportunity, right? But if there is something like that, then definitely this will be a trump card in your CV also saying, I have done something different from the rest of them on the campus. I have worked on a campus idea, tried to validate it and build a company. Then you would be way ahead of the others as well. And definitely this is one way of keeping yourself productively engaged and see how you could do something different and value add to your own professional and personal life as well. And if you are a student looking at solving some specific problems, because this is one, I would say advice, I would say a tip always given to potential entrepreneurs, never arrive at a solution and go looking out for a problem. Always identify a problem and then work backwards and see how can I work on a solution to solve this particular problem. And India, I would see anything you peep out of your window, there is a problem, means there is an opportunity to solve that particular problem, right? So architecture encompasses, I would say for me, architecture encompasses the entire ecosystem of construction. Maybe it's got to do with materials, maybe it's got to do with processes, maybe it's got to do with the systems, maybe it's got to do leveraging technology to do something different, to build something different, which again, I think Navkrishna will throw more light on what he is doing. So when you do that, you can always relate to the problem which is there and how you could build a solution around it. Now, how should students go about? Now, if you are a student wanting to do something, but you're not sure what to do, how do I learn the nuances of doing a startup or nuances of working on an innovation itself, right? So there are multiple ways. Could be some are very low hanging, which you could start off without, I would say, much investment in terms of time and effort. First one is there are multiple hackathons which keep happening. Hackathons are typically an exercise where a time-bound exercise where a solution for a problem is done. Typically, software guys do coding to arrive at a solution for a problem. Now there are business hackathons happening. Architectural hackathons can also happen, right? You give a problem statement, you ask people to come build. Now with COVID, it can also be done virtually, right? So either you could organize these things or participate in some of them to experience what needs to go into doing all this, right? Second one is a business plan competition. See, business plan is actually a blueprint. I think all of you from the architecture fraternity, you would very well understand what is a building plan, right? See, building plan essentially is a blueprint of how the building should look, what should be in the building, which may also include your projections, your budgeting, your costing, estimation, and a whole lot of comprehensive things. Similarly, a business plan is a comprehensive document which will contain all elements of the business. Who's your customer, who's your market, what price you should sell, what is the segment you should look at, and a whole lot of things. Now, today, if you see, there are a lot of institutions which organize business plan competitions specifically for students, where students can go pitch their business plan, what they have, and there would be a jury who would give you inputs, validate your business plan. Some of the business plans also get prize money in return. This again could also give you a very good idea about, you may not be very serious about what you're going to do, right? But when you get an exposure like this, you would also understand what are the other guys trying to do. So what are the businesses they are working on? How does a real business model look? So there'll be a lot of learning which can happen when you participate in a competition like this. The third one, of course, is definitely entrepreneurship events, right? There are, for example, IIT Kharagpur, IIT Bombay, they do an entrepreneurship fest every year, which is running into, I think, 4 or 5 days fest, packed with sessions on talks, keynote addresses, entrepreneurs sharing their experience, startups pitching in for funds. Then there are entrepreneurship quiz, a lot of events happening. I think some of you who want to have a dipstick understanding of what is happening, what is entrepreneurship, what is this all about, should probably start attending these sessions. So start attending programs like this. And if some of these serious guys who are there, who feel that, I should go about, study something, do some solid homework, and then only understand, there are a lot of courses and workshops also, especially even through Udemy, Coursera. There are a lot of courses which are available today, even online, for you to just go through and understand basically what is entrepreneurship or how to build a startup, right? That is one. Second thing is, if some of you want a real hands-on understanding, right, you could engage as an intern with a startup. For example, there could be many startup companies like Navkrishna's, who always look for students or the bright guys, who want to work, because most of the startups have big dreams. Most of the times in initial stages, it is all big dreams but empty pockets, right? So the more the hands, the merrier. So they would love to entertain you to probably work on a part of their problem, what they're trying to solve. Maybe it's got to do with business, maybe it's got to do with the technology, or maybe it's got to do with market assessment. You could always chip in and also learn in the process, right? Or if the startup is ready to offload part of what they're trying to build, that could translate to a mini project for you. If you're really serious, I would say 2 to 5% of the students on the campus are real campus entrepreneurs, right? So if you're really serious on starting a company, it's a good idea to start on the campus. Primarily because, as I told you, it will help you validate your idea, right? People around you, your friends, peers, teachers, professors, or industry experts will tell you whether the idea is good, should you start, right? And experience of starting a company is huge, enormous, right? The concept of working in teams, getting things done, perseverance, all these adjectives you will learn when you start doing, right? So experience is a great teacher, and starting a company on the campus, if not for anything else, would help you to understand how you have to be a hands-on person in trying to do things. And it will definitely be a great value add to your CV. People will, especially the industry guys, would appreciate that you are not bound to your theory and books. You definitely do something more hands-on. And definitely it's a way of keeping yourself more productively engaged. And if you're able to get a mentor who could mentor you and handhold you and help you through your validation process until the scaling up your startup, there's all the more good opportunity why you should have a startup on the campus. When we're talking about mentors, the question which comes is, who is a mentor? Whether it is a student startup or a mature startup like Navkrishna, who's there in the ecosystem, I think a mentor is somebody whom the startup has to own, saying he or she can mentor. I'm sure now would fully agree with what I'm telling. Now, first of all, when you look up to somebody, you should definitely have positive vibes over the person and say, yes, he or she is my role model. I would definitely be keen to hear or give all my ears to this person when he or she says, what is it I should be doing? So the positive role model concept is again very, very important. Mentor is also somebody who has to be your friend. It is not a monologue. Typically, I think that is where, as faculty, probably faculty will have to work with student entrepreneurs more as a friend, cutting across the hierarchy which is typically there. And probably also as a coach who should probably tell them what is doable, what is not doable. Especially for a student entrepreneur who's trying to ride two horses parallelly, you should probably tell them where to take a call and what to prioritize when and where. And advise them on specific things, right? In terms of what could be done, in terms of timing or idea per se, a whole lot of things. Or connect them to potential people who could do, right? I think that itself is a mentor's role. See, today, everybody cannot mentor on everything, be it technology, be it business, be it idea, be it strategy, be it anything, everybody cannot mentor. But at least you can be a mentor to a student who comes to you and show him a direction as to who can mentor them. And of course, build a self-esteem. This is pretty much changing in India today. I think about 15 years back, when some student said, I want to be an entrepreneur. So getting the confidence from the immediate family itself was a huge challenge. See, yesterday I was talking to a set of two brothers who are from Coimbatore. Now, these people are still in the final year of college. They've already formed a company. They have a hearing aid device, which is more of an innovative device for a hearing aid supplement. Now, the first question I asked them was, they are called Ram and Lakshman, both brothers. I asked them, what was your family's reaction? Was there any resistance from them for you doing this full time? Because I think they are now in the seventh semester, one more semester to go. Then immediately they said, no, ma'am, our family is very happy. They want us to do full time. So we've even opted out of campus placement. So things are changing now. If you say, I want to be somebody who wants to start a company, I think the families are also now starting to help students do this. And the role of the mentor becomes all the more important because you will have to build a self-esteem and career them, counsel them into their career as to prioritize them as to what needs to be done. To do all this, what I've listed, the faculty themselves should be a firm believer in the concept of entrepreneurship. If the faculty says, no, all this cannot be done, otherwise so many guys would have done, you do your academics first, this can be done later, I'm sorry, that later never comes, right? So as a faculty mentor, you should be somebody who should be a strong advocate of entrepreneurship, strong advocate of being on your own and doing something different. Typically, when students start on the campus, these are the barriers they face. The first barrier they have is the idea good? So that lack of self-confidence, in discussing their idea openly with somebody is a huge challenge for student entrepreneurs. So is the idea good? Should I do or not do? Will somebody laugh? What to do? I mean, no idea is good or bad unless it is being validated, right? And campus is the best place and faculty mentors are the best guys to help these students validate their idea. The second apprehension they have is, what if somebody replicates or copies my idea? If the idea is so, I would say, so low barrier of entry that anybody can copy, they may as well copy after you enter the market, right? So I think there should be no apprehension on somebody is copying your idea. I always tell wherever I go that entrepreneurship or startup is a long marathon. You need a lot of perseverance, willpower, and gut to keep going. I think Nav will also share some of his stories of what has sustained him. And it's like tough only get going, right? I think there's a saying, right? When going gets tough, the tough get going. This is for somebody like that. So never have apprehension that what if somebody copies. So you should always, in fact, feel free to share your ideas from multiple people and take their inputs because it will always help you to structure your thought process about the startup much better. The third one is, I have no experience. Should I gain some experience and then start? This is again typically a chicken and egg story, right? And window of opportunity for a startup is very, very small. Unless there is some competitor who already comes in, then, you've lost the first mover advantage. So you should probably start and do some pilot and try validate and then make it a full-fledged startup. Can I do it alone? This is both an yes and no, because typically when you are starting it, it has to start alone somewhere, but over a period of time, you should probably bring in teammates with complementary skills which help you grow. Am I too young? No, because I know many entrepreneurs who started their companies in school. I don't know how many of you have heard of Suhas Gopinath. one of the acclaimed entrepreneurs. I think he was the youngest entrepreneur in the world with the Guinness Book of Record. He's from Bangalore, whom I know pretty well. He started his company at the age of 15. So there's nothing like starting too young, right? So yeah, this slide I will skip because I've already covered in the previous one. Now, if you look at a component of a thriving startup ecosystem, these are the typical things which are there in the ecosystem. You would have support organizations which are there, then big companies, corporates who are there, who also keep innovating, who also keep looking at innovations which are happening, which are relevant to their own company portfolio. Of course, universities and academic campuses which are there, which are the rock bed of any research and innovations which happen. And funding organizations, maybe government departments, maybe banks, and many other schemes, maybe DST, METI, Government of Karnataka also has multiple programs of funding startups. Then a lot of service providers and research organizations, right? And all this also includes all these, investors, mentors, advisors, predominantly who are part of the larger ecosystem. In the bigger scheme of things, what role does an incubator play? I would probably cover the next couple of slides from the point of view of the faculty, but also indicate how students would also benefit by having an incubator on the campus, right? If I am right, I don't think there is one incubator all over the country specifically for architectural based companies. I think there could be a good opportunity if NITTE can take a lead and build a specific incubator for, see, you need not even say architects, it could be for the construction industry at large, where architecture is also one space, right? Now, in such a situation, what role does an incubator play? I'm sure all of you are aware of the incubators which we talk for in small babies, which are probably premature. A startup is also like a premature baby, which is born, but not yet grown to its stage where it can survive, be on its own. Then what role does an incubator play? Incubator, apart from the physical space, shared operational costs, internet, blah, blah, which are very, very low hanging, right? Now, today with COVID, everybody is able to work from home. So what's the need for an office? So I think the thought process of having a physical incubator in four walls is dying. So incubators are a place where you can network, number one. You should be able to meet a lot of mentors and experts who can give you various value add in terms of validating your idea, giving you connects, enabling your pilot trials and a whole lot of things. Probably again, incubators could be another place where you could look at facilitating investor connects. And of course, access to market, right? You build something, you need to sell, right? So access to market. So whole lot of things, ultimately to see that the startups survives and then scales up. Now, I think next few slides, see all this, many of you here, the faculty here may feel all this talking is very fine, but can it all happen in reality? So I just want to share a couple of slides of where we started, specifically where I started at Dayanand Sagar, I think about 10 years back, and how what is it we are doing now and how it has grown. This is specifically the story of Derby. I think it's already close to about 11 years. 2009, we started doing innovation entrepreneurship activities. Now, just if I put a step back, I was heading the MBA program in 2007-8. Again, Dayanand Sagar is engineering college. This MBA department was one department in engineering college. Engineering students, placing engineering students on the campus is always an easy job for the placement officer, right? Because they always come and they are hired truckload, 100 students, 200 students, Infosys, Cognizant, it used to happen. MBA student was always a big challenge. So what we did, I used to think how to enhance these skill sets of MBA students. So having done my homework, then I found out that probably entrepreneurship is a good way to go. So 2008, I reached out to National Entrepreneurship Network, which manages close to about 600 to 700 entrepreneurship cells all over the country. They did not even have a Bangalore office then. It is run by Wadhwani Foundation. Reached out to them saying, I want to set up an entrepreneurship cell. Can you help us? Then one of the consultants said, yeah, next week I'm coming to Bangalore. We could meet up. So the conversation started from there. Then we set up an entrepreneurship cell, then which was formally inaugurated in 2009. if you can see, I think Mr. Sadanand Maya from Maya came for the inaugural. And subsequent to that, lot of activities we've been doing regularly. We started with small ones. See, 2009 to 2012, we started doing a whole lot of activities, inviting entrepreneurs to the campus to share their stories. Then did a lot of CEO Connects, where CEOs used to come share their stories. Like, for example, today Now Krishna is a CEO, right, who is going to share his story of how he started his startup to what he is today. We did a whole lot of activities till 2011. I think for me personally, 2011 was an eye-opener because entrepreneurship cell on the campus, those days there was no mandatory submission to either AICTE or MHRD on innovation entrepreneurship activities on the campus. So there was no, I would say, pressure on the management also to support more entrepreneurship activities on the campus. So it had to be a more self-driven, self-funded activity, right? Whether you call speakers or whatever you do, there were funds which were required. So what I did, I started exploring how I could make this as a more self-sustainable activity and a long-term activity on the campus. So then I realized that Government of India, DST, was supporting institutions with funding to set up innovation and entrepreneurship centers all over the country. So I wrote a proposal in 2011, and 2012, we got 48 lakhs spread over 5 years. It was from 2012 to 2016, primarily with a mandate to support 5 student entrepreneurs every year for 5 years. Basically to identify, give them mentoring, support, space, technology, blah, 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 all that, help them to scale up. I think 2012 to 14, we did a phenomenal job because even though it was a 5 startup, we were able to support them with a lot of corporate connects, where corporates are always happy to work with students because they always feel young minds also bring in a lot of fresh new ideas. And DST was very happy the way we were running the program. So we pre-closed the program. It was supposed to get over in 2016. We pre-closed the program in 2015, graduated to a full-fledged TBI. Now again, 2014, when the head of the DST told me to write a proposal for a TBI, to be very frank, I had no clue what is a TBI, what does the acronym TBI stands for. It was a huge, I would say vertical digital learning for me, from where I was at 0 to where 1, I think it was a huge learning for me. I had to learn, really did a lot of homework of what are incubators, how do incubators work. Today, of course, there are a lot of workshops for incubator managers and things like that. There, most of it was self-learning. Spoke to a couple of people. I think one thing what we should do as a faculty is never be ashamed of saying, I don't know. Be open to learning. Met a lot of people from the incubation ecosystem, visited IIT Bombay, which is one of the best incubators in the country, understood how their incubator works. So did a lot of homework. And one thing I should say here is the support I got from the management of Dayanand Sagar. From day one, I think they are really visionaries and they have enabled this whole thing to happen. They have actually facilitated the whole thing to happen. A lot of freedom to operate, right? So having said that, knowing them well, I knew that we have to set up a TBI, whether we get a DST fund or not. So 2015, when we started putting the blueprint of what we wanted to do, what we did was I had a plan A and plan B. So plan A was this with the DST fund. Any government funded program is always a nice honeymoon period, right? Where you lavishly spend and do a hi-fi incubator, or without the government fund, still frugally how we could run the incubator. So we had 2 plans. Fortunately, 2015, we got the government funding and we set the ball rolling. So we started supporting a lot of startups, and initial cohort, I think Rousing Designs, which Now Krishna founded, was also a part of our program. So we specifically started focusing on more an IoT, AI startup. And as we grew along, we also realized that incubation ecosystem was also becoming more crowded. Now, Bangalore today, I think, has more than, I would say, 200 incubators, government, private, corporate incubators, all put together. In this crowded ecosystem, if we have to add our own value add, then we should do something different, right? So what we did was, we are now, last few years, of course, we've been more focusing on healthcare, primarily trying to leverage what support we could get from Sagar Group, because we have a medical college, medical hospital, and a whole lot of things also. So last, I think, 3 years, we've been focusing more on healthcare. But having said that, no, the opportunities are huge and enormous. These are all the slides which really detail out what we've been doing, right? Started as an e-cell, did a whole lot of programs, and this person on the left, the last corner is Suhas, whom I just now mentioned. And the second photo is where Shanmuga is taking up the check for 1 lakh, again, which the management gave a check for 1 lakh to support his idea, no? He was running a company on the campus. And we did a couple of activities, of inviting CEOs on the campus. Initially, what started as an activity which was bound only to the MBA department slowly started expanding all over the campus. A lot of engineering students started taking interest. Students started driving activities. See, initially, we have to set the ball rolling, right? Then they love doing anything outside classroom, be it inviting people, inviting guests, delivering talks. It was fantastic. Only thing, I used to get them leads, talk to people. Then they used to do everything. As you can see, there are a whole lot of programs we did, whether it is CEO Connects, or we spoke to brought-in entrepreneurs like Bhaskar or Catherine, who was again a designer consultant, but brought in perspective of how to do something beyond traditional businesses. Then, of course, Vadvani also wanted us to host a lot of faculty development programs. So we did that, and a whole lot of student development programs. See, when we supported Vadvani with our infrastructure, campus, classroom, blah, 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 support all that, they also supported a lot of our students to attend, sponsored them for programs, workshops on all these topics which we are listed here. And IEDC, what we started, again, huge challenge when we started doing the IEDC, the students program, what I said. Starting from drafting the application. When we drafted the application, I remember it had asked specifically that you should have 3,000 square feet of space, right? Now, I had to do a lot of homework on where is the space available in the campus, who would give me, then went back to the management. Then they said, you identify some space which is available in the campus, what is currently there, we will do that for you, no problems. And constantly, I think one mantra I've been following all these years is reach out to people beyond the campus. Because whether it is running an incubation program or running an entrepreneurship activity is definitely not an activity which the faculty can do or not trained to do. So you need, as faculty, you need advice from people who've been there, who've done it before. So constantly, whether we're talking about IEDC or Derby Foundation, I would say my biggest trump card is the people of advisors who are there from the ecosystem. So we formed an advisory board. And those days, I used to run the IEDC and also used to run the department, head the department. So multitasking was always a challenge. When you're running a department full-time, that is a full-time job, right? So running a center like this also needs equal attention, right? But as faculty, I think one mantra is never give up. What you want to do, never give up. And always keep seeing how you could support entrepreneurs and help them scale up. So after IEDC, we set up a pre-incubation activity, what you see in the photographs on the right. And see, for pre-incubation activities, anybody could do, even ITech could do, right? What you need is a small space, pull together a set of students who want to be an entrepreneur, have no idea what to do. Ask them to organize programs, events, where entrepreneurs could come, talk to them, things like that. And Derby was incorporated in 2015. It's a serious responsibility, right? So that is where I had to take a call when Derby was formed, saying, will I run the department or take this up as a full-fledged opportunity, right? Give up my, I would say, comfort zone of running an academic department. Again, not as challenging as running a company, right? Because here this is a separate Section 8 private limited company where I'll have to satisfy multiple stakeholders. Of course, the college management, registrar of companies, do all the compliances, file the returns, file the IT returns, ROC compliances. Third one is the Government of India, which is funding, supporting all our programs. They are the key stakeholders. Satisfy them, continue writing grants, continue getting support. And our core existence is today is the startups, right? See how startups could be supported, be it connect, be it validation, be it whatever required so that they sustain and grow, right? And running an incubator, I think, taught me one important lesson is running an incubator is a really, really hands-on exercise, which is far away from the theory what was taught in the classroom. So as faculty, I think, are you ready for this game? It's a very, very serious thought you should run through. So this has been a quick snapshot of what we've done in Derby so far. So with the incorporation in 2015, actually funding came in 2016 from DST. This year, we are entering the 5th year of the DST funding. What we've done is tapped into multiple programs of DST and METI, I would say last 5 years. And whether it is a program for developing a prototype for startups or fellowship for potential entrepreneurs or innovative solution they're trying to build or a seed fund, I think cumulatively we have tapped into close to about 25 crore of funding from DST. I would say this is only the tip of the iceberg, right? Because there is much more to explore, much more to tap and grow. I think from this journey so far, I think the biggest takeaway for me has been network is the biggest strength. I mean, build a network, leverage. Network could be with people outside your ecosystem or your own startups. See, for example, now Krishna was just a phone call away for me, right? I could call him, tell him this is our opportunity, we should probably do together, which he readily agreed, thanks to him. So network is the biggest strength. And in fact, I remember when I went to DST to pitch in for the incubator support, see, one of our own experts whom we had called for the CEO Connect was there as a part of the jury. So he knew what is a good work we are doing at the center, and he recommended our case to Government of India. So network is the biggest strength. And have a good network of advisors who can really advise you on what would work, what would not work, be it financial, be it your business strategy. So even at Derby Foundation, I think our biggest strength is our advisory board, what we have. All of them do it pro bono, but help us with what needs to be done and how to scale up. And as somebody who's doing this, I think India, if you see, the incubation ecosystem is just starting with the mandate that all the regulatory bodies, whether it is MHRD or AICTE, the way things are going, definitely it will be a compulsion for every campus to have this, right? Having said that, I think it's all the more better that faculty gear up and learn to do multiple things and adapt to multitasking, right? I mean, the beginning stages, definitely, I was not in a position to tell the faculty, I will do only innovation entrepreneurship activities. Till there is some traction, we'll have to multitask. And it's a good industry to be in. Incubation is a wonderful industry to be in. I think for somebody who's trying to do something like this on the campus, focus, and focus. Focus on what you want to give, be it startups, be it students, and never give up. Because incubation and entrepreneurship is still, I would say, an offbeat initiative in the campus, right? I mean, still Indian campuses have to gear up to the concept of innovation, entrepreneurship at large. I think, but the time has come. Yeah. Okay. I think I would probably end here, and any questions I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, ma'am. Inspiring talk. Any questions? Anybody?
So this is students. So this Derby Foundation, is it like the college also has some stake in it or some?
No, see, Derby Foundation is a not-for-profit entity. It's a not-for-profit Section 8 company.
Right.
And when a Section 8 is formed, you should minimum have 2 directors for the Section 8. See, both the promoters of Dayanand Sagar, the chairman and the vice chairman, are the promoter directors of Derby Foundation.
Okay.
Yeah. It depends. There are some institutions whom I know, they have multiple people as directors, including the people at the head of the incubator also.
Sorry, your voice was breaking.
No, there are some institutions. It may not be limited only to the management of the college.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but it is in the campus. It is within the campus and.
No, actually, see, we are Dayanand Sagar. The host institution for Derby was Dayanand Sagar College of Engineering, which is in Kumaraswamy Lane. But we are located in the Hosur Road campus because the ambience and the infrastructure for the incubator is what we have is excellent. So we are housed here. We are part of the host institution itself.
Wonderful.
It is not a must that it should be within the campus. It can be anywhere.
Right. Okay.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Yeah, good afternoon.
I'm Architect Glenn.
Yeah.
Very, very inspiring and very clear session. Thank you for your thoughts and
Thank you
experiences,
so
ma'am.
much.
Ma'am, so like you rightly said, this is the time of innovation in startups. Like, I think that's the general discussion. You walk into a cafe, you can hear at least 5 groups of friends talking about it. So, how do you, I mean, how does this actually work when you have a center? Because most of the people today have ideas, right? So how is it like there is a sort of a prototype or a template that that you follow so that we are able to sort of distill out the good ideas or the ideas that have potential? How does it work? Like, will it really help us? Like, if I have 2 or 3 things that I want to pursue in my mind,
Sure.
for me to get a clarity on which is the best one to go ahead with. So, is there like a template or is there like a methodology that these kind of
Yeah,
centers
actually, see,
guide us
what we
through?
do is, there are two things. One is at Derby Foundation, we have 3 programs. We have a pre-incubation program, we have an
Okay.
incubation and an acceleration program. I think
Right.
pre-incubation is essentially for somebody at an ideation stage, right? You come with an
Okay.
idea, we run them through a 3 months program.
Right.
There's something called a business model canvas, a very well
Okay.
accepted framework, which
Right,
there are
right.
about 10 to 12 windows in that, which talks about your customer, your market, your value prop you're bringing, your revenue, your distribution
Okay.
channel, partnerships, whole lot of things. So
Okay.
we help the potential entrepreneur or startup
Okay.
navigate through the business model canvas, in terms of understanding who's your customer, whether what will work and all that. And we tell any startup that was building some proposition, build a customer-centric organization.
Right, right.
Building,
Okay.
saying you're building this, you should always think who's going to be my customer. So talk to some 100 customers before you at least think this is viable.
Right.
I
Okay.
had a student some years back who came and said he wants to build an air-conditioned helmet. So I told him,
Okay.
this is fine, go talk to 100 people and come back and see whether this idea would work or not. Then
Okay.
after some 15 days, he came back and said, ma'am, I'm dropping the idea. Then I asked him,
Right.
what happened? He says, no, ma'am, because people are expecting that I will give them a retrofit to their existing helmet, number one. Number two,
Okay.
they want it to be compact, small, blah, blah, all that. And so many things the customer wants for 1,000 rupees, 2,000 rupees. It will never happen, right? And then this guy said, no, ma'am, this will not work. I'm dropping the idea.
Okay.
So
Okay.
sometimes it is better to validate your idea. Don't burn your resources and then go a long way.
Got it. Got it.
I think probably you should start something in your department small, no? At least ask students to submit a half a page or half a paragraph, students or faculty also. Do you have an idea about what you want to do? Something innovative, even 4 or 5 to start off, put them all together, then you could see what are their ideas, each one could learn from other. We can help you organize sessions, help them run through a business model canvas of what needs to be done. Set up some sort of a pre-incubation center. Once you have an understanding, 6-8 months, open your center to all architects all over the country. Today anything is possible virtual, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you.
Any more questions?
I think Anit Jesse, has raised the hand.
Anit? Any questions, Anit?
Okay, must have raised Sure.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for this inspiring presentation. So now I invite Navakrishna to give his seminar.
Excuse me, ma'am. I have one question. Can I just clarify it?
Yeah, Gokul.
Yeah, ma'am. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
This is Gokul from architecture student.
Yeah.
Ma'am, is it like the idea which you are like helping us? Is it like we have the idea, but it's not in a clear form, like
No
it's
problem.
not into a crystal form. So will you help us develop the idea into a proper crystal form and then we proceed, or we should have a proper?
No. See, even if you have an idea in your mind, saying this is what I want to do, we can help you structure the idea and validate the idea as well.
So till that, like structure it and patent it and
Yeah, we can take you through and through, no problems. Yeah. In fact, today there are a lot of programs available even through government. For example, there is a fellowship program given from DST for somebody who wants to be an entrepreneur, where you get a fellowship of 30,000 rupees for a year to sustain.
So, ma'am, like we have, should we have to register somewhere for that, to
Now, what I
attend
would
this?
suggest is probably I can share my mail ID on the chat box. You can write to us and then we could take it offline.
Yeah, ma'am. Sure, ma'am.
Yeah, sure. Done. Okay.
Uh,
Personally, yeah.
Yes, raised is. Do you have any questions?
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon. It was a really interesting session, ma'am. And I just wanted to ask you, are you an incubator that is more product-centric or service-centric, or what is your general
Yeah,
idea?
see, we are an incubator which is sector specific. We initially started as a product incubator, but then no, I mean, more than being a product or service, we felt it makes a lot of sense to be sector specific. So we support startups predominantly in the healthcare as of now, both on the product and service. For example, if you say AI, AI is not a product, it's more of a software. And there are many startups who also have software as a service model as well. So we do both, but more on the healthcare.
Okay, thank you. No, the reason I was asking was I wanted to get where you were coming from with some of the things that you were saying. That's why. Thanks so much.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Any more questions? Anybody? Okay, ma'am. I think
Yeah. Thank you.
that's all the questions. So I invite now Krishna to present his seminar, his topic, and discuss his journey. Over to you now, Krishna.
Thank you, Dr. Nalini. Dr. Lakshmi, we should meet apart from conferences as well.
Yeah. True enough.
Visit you, and it's been a while since I shared things we've been working on. So maybe this could be the kickoff meet for the catch up offline.
Yeah. Looking forward to hearing you as well.
Absolutely, ma'am. Absolutely. Thank you all, first of all, for joining. This is most likely a post-lunch session, so I'm assuming this is the lazy part of the day. I'll try and keep it as easy to follow along. It will be mostly me trying to share things I have gone through and things I feel that in retrospect I could have done better. Hopefully, you will learn a little bit from my sources of inspiration and also from my mistakes. So what I'll do is I will share my screen with you and take you through few milestones that I feel I crossed while I was in the process of figuring out what matters to me and what is it that I want to put out into this world. All right. Questions are welcome. I would have really enjoyed interacting with you all physically. So please do not hesitate to maybe raise your hand or prompt me in between and just ask away. I would encourage as much interaction as possible. All right, so I'll go ahead and share my screen. Dr. Nalini, maybe you can be my source moderator. If you can see my screen, please just raise your hand and let me know that things are fine.
Yes, we can see the screen. Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So before I kick start on where I was coming from and what I was thinking, time to abuse the platform a little bit. Let me quickly speak about my company. My company is called Rousing Designs. We primarily focus on ambiances, and effectively we are a lighting data technology company. This one-line statement has taken some time for us to arrive at, and as I go forward in the discussion of various topics, maybe some of it will make sense to you, and you will realize it's really important to continue to revisit your sources of inspiration. I call them the big questions. You could choose to place your sources of inspirations anywhere that connects with you. So the thought and the idea that actually began as far as the connect with my personal self is concerned, that's the thought of existentialism. Now, it could sound like a bit academically dense topic because it actually is. In the interest of all of us having the same meaning about this particular word, I would just like to put out this definition. So existentialism explores the problem of human existence and centers on issues related to meaning, purpose, and the value of human existence in totality. So if you have a philosophical bent, you may want to look at popular authors who've spoken about existentialism, be it Kierkegaard or Friedrich Nietzsche. And I would actually encourage you to experiment with ideas. Luckily, you all are in the design field, and ideas are what you live by, right? We do not exist in the now, we exist in the future as far as our ideas are concerned. And it's very, very important to continue forming a bridge between what we imagine and how the nature of reality actually brings us back to being practical and pragmatic about it. So the thought of existentialism is extremely dear to me, and I can always hit either one of you up on for a conversation on deeper topics. So please feel free to reach out to me. Now, why do I bring up this particular topic in today's discussion and my own journey towards browsing? Primarily because, in my opinion, I think all of you, since you are in the pursuit of a skill of design, and you are in that age group where these big questions come to you. Whether they come to you now or they come to you later, one thing is a guaranteed part of life. I have seen 100% of people I have interacted with and met so far, they have encountered these big questions at some point or the other. For me, these big questions are, who am I? What am I doing? And what is my why? It's very important to live a little with these questions, and it's also important to understand that you may not have all the answers in one shot, but the very fact that these questions have come to you indicates that you are now thinking deeper about your own existence, and hence, for me, existentialism is an ongoing realization. So if I dove a little deeper into who am I, maybe I thought I was something, and then I was something else, and then I was something else entirely, right? So I'll quickly give you a brief about where I come from educationally. I hold a mechanical engineering degree, and I graduated in the year 2010. After I became a mechanical engineer, I actually got my first job as a design engineer. I was really happy because mechanical engineers, at least in the year that I was passing out, were really struggling as far as the job market was concerned. And I really felt blessed to have landed a job. While at work, I realized there existed a whole new different set of people who are no longer my peers alone. What do I mean by that is, at college, we interacted with people primarily of our age, who had very similar takes on life, who had spent approximately a similar amount of time on this planet. But at work, I got to interact with people from different spheres, with varying experiences and interests. It was not just about the professional courses that they were taking, but each of them was focused on a particular problem or a particular deliverable that they were working towards. Some of these were stalwarts in their own right, and I was very, very lucky to have interacted with them and spent some time. And I thought that, I think the answer to who am I is I am a design engineer. Or at least I thought that was the case for a while. What happened when I began to interact with this set of learned individuals was I began to really, really understand that the things that interest me the most are related to ideas. If you have a problem to solve and you really do not have a template of solving that problem, you start by approaching it with certain hypotheses. You say, hey, let's try this. What will happen if I did this? I read a bit about Einstein and his famous thought experiments, and that really opened up my mind to thinking about a problem. All he did was just conduct thought experiments. The theory of relativity was a result of a thought experiment. If you get some time, either of you, please do make an effort to check out the train problem that Einstein describes in his thought experiment. The whole point being that I began to enjoy thinking about a problem so much that I kept backtracking, or I began tracing the origins of whatever I saw around me. I can very proudly claim that someone as great as Elon Musk calls this the first principle thinking, and I was practicing it without realizing what I was doing. I felt I didn't just want to be a design engineer, and there was so much more for me to learn and understand as far as creating a product is concerned. Bringing something to life, I think I started on my journey towards understanding how it was done. So I wanted to educate myself. The timing of my shift from my mechanical engineering days to a design engineer towards pursuing a master's in product design, the timing of my shift was extremely, I would say, unique. The thing was, I was doing really well work-wise. I was a good worker. I would follow instructions really well, and I was a good engineer. I can claim that I was a good engineer, primarily because I had ratings to prove the same, and I was consistent. So that really gave me a boost as far as learning and picking up new things was concerned. However, when I began to understand that what I really wanted to go after was this pursuit of the origin of ideas. I wanted to educate myself, and so I quit my job in the year 2014 and so on, and I went about learning the trades of becoming a product designer. And then I thought, yeah, I know who am I now. I know I have the answer of who am I. I am now a product designer. I got to interact with really, really interesting people through this course. And in fact, our head of department was the ex-chairman of CPDM at IISc. And Professor and I really had some extremely interesting chats about nature of problems and how do we approach solutions and designs. So I really felt blessed to have interacted with people like him, or even my principal, who was actually he was one of the first team members of the TVS design team, and well, he would share stories of his heydays all the time, and we would lap it up like wartime stories. Right? So it was so interesting. Towards the end of that course, I felt like, okay, so I know who I am now. I'm a product designer, and I have the skill to turn an idea into reality. And I think I found my purpose, and I should go after it. So I joined a couple of design organizations, and beyond my initial years of practice, I actually opened up my own company, which was still called Rousing Designs, but we hadn't reached the identity statement yet. So for me, the answer of what was I after a product designer I became more of an entrepreneur, and an entrepreneur with a focus on design. And I really thought that this is it. I have now successfully answered the question behind who am I. Let me tell you right away, it doesn't end at this. And there are things that I feel I still need to work on, but more of that in the latter part of this discussion. The other big question that I wanted to focus on was, what am I doing? And whatever I am doing, does it really matter? And to whom does it matter? Am I merely doing something to satisfy my own way of thought? Do I think this is what I should be doing and hence I am doing it? So the answer of for whom am I doing what I am doing, is the answer me? Am I merely doing it for myself? These are questions that I still ask myself, and most days the answers are not the same. Which brings me to my next question. What is my why? This is a very, very big question, in my opinion, and I think each one of us should definitely spend some time merely trying to question what drives us. We are all here as having some interaction to art in some form or the other. So I can maybe go on a limb and say there is a particular kind of art, or maybe you like all kinds of art. But there is something about art that actually drives you, that stirs a sense of passion inside you. But what is it? What makes you feel like you want to now burst out in tears, right? Have you ever experienced something so beautiful that all you wanted to do was just be there and cry your heart out? What is my why? I think this is a question that I like to revisit often. I feel I have, over a period of time, become better at attempting to answer these three important questions. I still hope that I tell myself that I am doing sufficiently well enough as far as my attempts to answer these questions are concerned, and I give myself a passing grade, at least right now. So post some soul searching about these big questions and the time that they arrived in my life, and after my master's, having worked in a couple of design firms and opened up my design service company. I want to really point out that you need a sense of bravado, and you have to take a leap of faith at some time. I do recall there was a discussion of a process being available to shortlist your ideas and figure out how impactful it can be. The only thing I want to say definitively is all that the template would do for you is give you a sense of a probability. It will increase your chances of success, but nothing can really guarantee it. So the more structured approach you take towards an unknown, like starting your own company, it's really a very, very big unknown. And there are so many uncertainties that come with starting a company that at some point you really have to get out of analysis paralysis and just take a leap of faith. You will not regret it, is my only possible takeaway that I can give you. You will not regret starting a company, provided you have done some soul searching on the big questions. And I can bet my life on the fact that these big questions will come, they will raise their head in your life. If not now, if not tomorrow, someday, absolutely. So a quick trace of what happened when I had a sense of bravado and I said, okay, you know what? I don't know what's going to happen. I do not come from a business background. I know some things about design. I don't know if it will work. Let me just give it a shot. So 2015, I joined a program in IIM Bangalore, and I think that was the culmination of a lot of my soul searching and some of the ongoing questions I was asking. I got a sense of like-minded cohort where I could discuss and have a sort of brainstorm with people who were really interested in how and why and what I was doing. In the year 2016, I actually met ma'am, and there was also the initial days of Derby. So I keep telling ma'am that Derby and Rousing are effectively startups. The difference being Derby is probably doing much better, right? It has a fantastic team, and I really had a great experience interacting with the support I received as a company during my early days, the time I got from learned individuals, the students who pitched in with their inputs and with their efforts in actually giving us a really good head start for a couple of years until well, this dreaded virus came along. I'm still in touch with a few of the students that we worked with initially, and now they're more like friends and not really employees. In the year 2020, as I said, well, something happened that we all went through collectively, and more importantly, I think it also gave us a time, or it forced us to pause what we were doing, and the moment you stop running around, things start coming towards you is what I believe in, because life has a way of going forward anyways. Well, the big questions came back. The big questions came back, and I think this time when I tried to answer these questions, I was a little happier with my attempt. I was a little happier with the answers that I was providing to myself, and I think I liked myself a little more. And then I realized this is an ongoing practice. I've been thinking about the big questions in a continuous manner, and hence I'm able to say, okay, so now that we have these challenges, so we were offering lighting design consultancy to hospitality, working with places like hotels and restaurants, and giving them a sense of how can they plan their lighting within a space. Also enabling their controls of lighting within the space to control the ambience, so to speak. Now, for the hospitality industry, ambience is a key part of their offering, and also we have it's a very physical experience, right? The first thing that suffered when COVID hit was the physicality of experiences altogether. People were not going out, places were getting shut, and the folks that we were working with, or the projects that we were working on, suddenly started to dwindle, and I went into my own existentialism questions. Okay, so now that we have this, what do we do next? Keeping that in mind, I would say as of today, we have fallen back on big questions more because of the constraints that we had to impose on ourselves. And I would also like to quickly take you through the different problems over the years and how the big questions have influenced those problems. Towards the end, we can look at some takeaways. I call it wisdom. You can also call it hindsight, which is 2020. And things that we are doing right now. Maybe you all can give me some of your inputs, and I would be really happy to listen in. Before I talk a little bit about the problems that we as a business are trying to solve, or were trying to solve, got a bit of understanding about the nature of the problems themselves. Are there any inputs or observations or questions that either of the audience members would like to ask before we go forward?
Any questions? students or faculty? I think so far no questions.
Sure, Doctor. I'll continue.
Yeah.
So effectively, it was very important to look at how we were trying to address problems, and you can see distinctly that there is actually a question mark on the third problem. The problem that we are trying to look at ever since we encountered our challenges with COVID. So in the early days of having been at Derby, the problem that we were trying to actually address was lack of access to meaningful design. Now, this is when Rousing was primarily a product design services company, and I can say proudly that we've taken more than about 10 products, whether hardware or software, from idea to prototyping. This is also linked to my identity, my initial identity of thinking that, hey, I was a product designer and let me do this. It makes sense to address this particular problem. And I was very happy doing it. I was extremely, I was having fun and it was really, really good going for a while. The reason for me to make a shift as far as the problem statement was concerned was the second question. Who am I doing it for? Am I doing it for myself? Am I doing it for a client's brief? Am I reporting to someone? Right? So some of these questions I think should have had self-explanatory answers, and some of it needed a bit more soul searching. What I concluded was it was very important for me to narrow down the problem and pick something that was more inspiring than anything else. So the second problem that post our existence as a design services company we wanted to address was the lack of structured design inputs for lighting up a space. This is when we were in the year between 2016 and 2020, where what we did effectively was we planned and executed lighting design projects with controllable lighting for more than 25 projects around Bangalore. Some of these are popular hangouts in Koramangala and Indiranagar, which you all have been to House of Commons or 1131 in Indiranagar, Sherlock's around Bangalore. So these are all done by us. The ambience that exists as part of lighting design, we had a major role to play in setting up those ambiences, figuring out how lighting affects moods, how can it affect buying behavior, what's the right ambience if you want to actually shoo people away, which is a problem in Bangalore. People don't want to leave because they're having a good time, but there are restrictions from the authorities that you have to shut down at so and so time. So how do you disrupt the ambience enough that people just get up and leave? So these are some very, very important, interesting problems that we encountered and addressed as part of our lighting design set of projects. Post-COVID, when physical spaces became a bit challenging, we also wanted to sort of reassess our value proposition and how we approach the industry as a whole. Currently, we are actually looking at some of these inefficiencies in supply chain of lighting industry stakeholders. What this effectively means is we are trying to address challenges that exist within, let's say, a lighting supply chain from manufacturing to retail. And we are trying to basically integrate these inefficiencies into one singular technological offering. We are currently on pilot with a couple of showrooms again, lighting showrooms with a software as a service product. And we are hoping that the question mark at the end of this problem number 3, the question mark actually goes away. it will obviously take a bit of time for us to validate and make sure we are on a track which actually gives us the leverage of coming back with a bang, with a new problem statement. The thing that I want to point out or highlight as far as the nature of problems go is how at each juncture things have narrowed down, and we have always been trying to look at problem statements in more specificity than before. And I would owe this to the arrival of big questions at each juncture, whether it was imposed on us or it was as a result of reflection internally within our team as well. But our attempt at answering those questions improved over a period of time, and hence I am confident that the very fact that we can approach the formulation of a problem statement with such specificity, with going into such details, encourages me about how we are doing things, and also hopefully the nature of problem itself is so large that we are able to create meaningful and lasting value. It's maybe an optimism of mine, or maybe some boisterousness as well. But I'm really confident that the very fact that we've increased the level of detail at each problem statement formulation, that very fact gives me a lot of confidence. So having discussed this, what I would like to do quickly is talk about a few takeaways. What's the wisdom in all of this? So my journey, yeah, it's my journey. I mean, maybe you resonate with it. Maybe you connect with a few portions of it. You will absolutely, each one of you will absolutely have a path that you will take, which will be yours. It will be unique to you. However, I am really hoping that you are driven with these big questions. My takeaway for you is, don't ever assume that if you have a semblance of an answer about these big questions, you have solved or you've received the answer completely. Big questions need to keep coming back. What I want to quickly do right away for you all is show you how my big questions came back and how they connect as far as my take on things goes. Just give me a moment. Let me try and collapse these so that you can see it all in a single screen. Okay. So as I said, the big questions need to keep coming back. What I realized about the first question was I'm actually not just one being. My identity is not restricted to being a designer or an engineer or a product designer or an entrepreneur. There is no restriction to who I am. And I should also stop imposing any restrictions on my identity. The first thing that I realized was I am not just one being. I believe the people in this audience, they have good music taste, and they listen to this artist called Bruno Mars. In one of his interviews, Bruno Mars said that I am a different person every day. And that's what I try and bring out through my music. And I think that really has stuck with me, because I think each one of us even looks at what is in front of us. The thing could be the same, but our ideas are not the same about it. We have, in the time of 24 hours, interacted with our environment, gotten inputs, had some thoughts, had some reactions, had our own mood swings, and sources of inspiration, and we could look at the exact same thing in new light, to use a lighting pun after a while. Please do realize and do not restrict yourself to being just one identity. That's my first takeaway for you all. What am I doing? I think what I'm doing right now is merely staying curious. I've been curious instinctively, and rather than worry about how meaningful and for whom am I doing what I'm doing, I think I just want to stay curious. Aristotle famously once wrote that the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. I don't know if you've experienced this yourselves. There is no end to detail of a particular topic. It's your knowledge and learning is probably restricted to how much you choose to interact with it, right? In fact, statistically, it is said that about 1,000 hours is the need for you to become an expert at a skill. If you practice it for 1,000 hours, that is. So for you to become an expert at something, you just need 1,000 hours. And even then, there are things that you do not know about it. So I would just tell you that when this big question arrives, for me, the mantra became to remain curious, and maybe you could follow that as well. The last big question, what is my why? I just want to pursue value. And what is value, right? That could be the next question. Okay, it sounds really fancy, but what is value? Please understand that value proposition is not defined by you alone. If you tell a prospective customer, hey, I'll do this for you, the customer, until he agrees to part with some of his own value, in this case, by means of a transaction, it could be money, it could be a connect, it could be a shout out by an influencer on Instagram. That's the value. Understand that value proposition is not defined by you alone. I was a fool to think that just because I am a design engineer or a product designer for that matter, and just because I knew how to create a product out of an idea, turn it into a prototype, I had the answers. I could create value. The most essential part of that story that was missing was there's another entity required to validate the fact that your value creation is actually valuable. I had a very famous quote by one of my mentors who said, you know, value and valuation, they just sound similar. So company valuation is a perception of how valuable your company is. So that got me thinking, okay, which effectively means that value is it's like a living being, it's like a small child, and it's constantly changing. You need to continue to iterate continuously about what you're offering. In today's session as well, I think the ability to screen share was not turned on initially. I'm sure the organizers of this particular event, they will make it as part of their checklist. They will iterate on the fact that, again, nobody else will probably, you know, struggle with screen share. Value proposition is not defined by a singular person. You have to obviously start somewhere. Maybe your starting point is a sense of bravado and a leap of faith. Maybe that's where you start from. Maybe you fall and fail, but you will be the richer for it. Trust me when I say that. To post this so-called rant of the big questions that need to keep coming back, the last thing I want to part with you before we wind up this session, and maybe I have interested you enough to ask a few questions. What I want to tell you is you have to keep uncertainty in check. Uncertainty will exist. When you start out, you will not know everything. In that scenario, just remember, you can't avoid it. So accept what you cannot change. But don't just fold over in the face of an obstacle. The more you attempt at solving a problem, the more number of ways you will get which work or don't work. But you will definitely get something out of your efforts. The single primary goal for you, if you are pursuing an idea and thinking about turning it into a venture, can be that, hey, so what are the uncertainties that I might encounter? And how can I reduce those uncertainties? For us, the problem number 3, which has a question mark today, this question mark today exists primarily because we are trying to be sure of these inefficiencies. We are trying to ensure that the value that we are trying to provide to our potential customers is actually valuable. It's not just existing in our imagination. So we are trying to reduce our uncertainty by starting out from the industry that we understand a little more than others. So we are trying to reduce the uncertainty by working on problems that we feel we have also encountered ourselves. So there is some kind of an anecdotal validation about the problem. So we are trying to reduce uncertainty by working with partners we've worked with before. But remember, it all started with a sense of bravado and a leap of faith. So, in the words of Richard Branson, just do it. I wish I could use the exact words that he's used, because it contains a profanity. I do not wish to mention it here, but just do it. To begin is what he says. You want to start. You will learn along the way. The kind of support that exists today for somebody willing to experiment with ideas, and who better than architects to think about ideas and build this world from the ground up? Who better than this set of people over here right now? You're all extremely privileged that today a support ecosystem exists, and I would say leverage it, build something that will last more than your lifetime. With that, I would like to conclude, and thank you for the attention that you could spare for me. Over to you, Nalini, Dr. Nalini.
Thank you, Mr. Navakrishna, for sharing your story of startup. It was very inspiring talk. Any questions, anybody?
Okay, this is Gayatri here. So how important was the mentorship in your entire journey?
Extremely important, primarily because I think at different points in our lives, we need somebody to guide us, somebody to actually tell us that objectively, most often than not, someone to tell us that if you're doing this, this is how it aligns or misaligns with, let's say, the norm that exists right now. It's very difficult to get good mentors, and today, through institutions like Derby Foundation or even Dr. Lakshmi herself, I've had extremely privileged discussions with her one-on-one. Importance of mentorship is extreme.
So, are there times when you felt like, when you were expressing your idea or putting your thought forward, that they are not understanding?
Sorry, could you repeat that for me? I think that I'm not able to follow.
Sorry, I didn't. Your voice was breaking.
He's asking you to repeat the question.
Okay. No, I was asking when you explained your idea, any time, like, to the mentor, were there situations where you felt that they're not able to follow you or they're not understanding the way you put the things in front of them?
Okay, okay. So let me just repeat that question so that I'm sure you said the same exact thing. What you're asking me is, were there times when I felt that the mentor was not able to understand or follow what I was saying?
Right.
Is that one of the questions?
Yes.
Okay. I would say a few times there definitely were instances where I felt like the mentor and I are exploring things together, and it took me a while to realize that even the mentor is human at the end of the day, right? They may not have all the answers. So their primary role is actually not to give you answers. Their primary role is to orient you and direct you towards what they feel in their right wisdom is the way to be. That's it. Correct? So let's say you have a team and there's a coach of the team. The coach will work on your skill or he will work on your mental state. But ultimately, you have to play the game, right? I hope I answered your question.
Yes. So in fact, the reason behind is like many times there are a lot of students here. When the student comes out with a solution or a design, when they explain it to the teacher, they feel when the teacher asks a question or puts a statement forward, they think that teacher doesn't understand, she doesn't know, right? And there are like couple of cases where I have been on either side, mentor side and mentee side, and that such kind of situations were quite often. So I was like curious. Yes.
Understood. Understood. I think the one important aspect of giving advice or having difficult conversations, even giving brutal feedback, it's very important to understand that if you can communicate this to anyone who comes up with an idea or a suggestion towards you, make sure you tell them this, that, hey, if your suggestion, basically if it's a hypothesis, if it stands the test of me challenging it from different perspectives, then it makes sense.
Sure.
If it doesn't, then it does not hold, it does not hold strong in the face of this scrutiny, right?
Right.
And believe me, like difficult conversations are very, very important. They are more important than we realize. That's why they're difficult. At the end of that difficulty, there is some treasure which we have to find. So it's very important for both the parties to kind of have this common value system that, okay, a difficult conversation exists, but uh, if there are challenges or if my views are being challenged, am I able to effectively communicate or convince the other person? If I'm not, maybe I have some thinking to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm architect Glenn.
Yes, Glenn, please go ahead.
Yeah, great to hear your story. And yeah, I hope the graph is always going well for you.
Yes.
So you've discussed and elaborate about idea and basically ideation and asking yourselves those questions and repeating it often. I think yeah, that's been very clear. So I'm just trying to understand something else, or rather just asking you this so that even the students here kind of benefit from what you think. So the whole idea of startup and ideas is definitely out there, and it's in the air right now. And I'm pretty sure that if we have close to 300 students, all of them have something that they feel they can do and they want to do, and you know how it is. So though we are in a time of social media and everyone's scrolling through phone and things like that, I still feel there is a lack of awareness about what's actually happening around, and they're not really connected. So I feel ideation, incubation. I mean, today, like you said, we have the opportunity. We just need to leverage it, go all in. But most often than not, what I have observed, in fact, probably in the early years of my career, that I have struggled also coming from a design space or being around creative people, is we're not very well equipped with how actually business works or how we should conceive it, for a simple reason, like we might not even know. I have seen a lot of my friends, who studied with me, who are not even aware of how basic, like how you were mentioning, how companies are evaluated, and every quarter there are reports released, and then they're like right now today, I think Zomato IPO is what is being discussed, but I'm not very sure of how many of these are the current generation, including mine. I'm not staying out of it. Are aware of it. So my question is, how important you think is I know that through mentorship, and when you have an idea, we go behind it, and in sometimes it works. A lot of parameters need to come together, but just to do that homework, or rather just be ready for the world today, how important is it to be aware of such things? As simple as, is it important, or did you always have that entrepreneur streak in you? Did you always think that maybe I should know what's happening in economic times? I should know what's happening with the business in the world. What is the market? So I mean, more than me, I just want to hear how it's been for you and how relevant you think it is, so that even the students, I feel, I see that gap, like they definitely have all the information on their fingertips, but we are not being able to really take it all in. And having that awareness, because it's not just about understanding business, because I feel a lot of the problems also come from that awareness of what's happening in the world now. So keeping all that in mind, sir, what's your take, or how have you been in general? Was it always there in you, and were you always aware of what's happening in the market and business in general, like as an entrepreneur?
Okay, long question. Uh, I'll try and break it down so that I'm able to
Yes.
do justice to multiple facets which you mentioned.
Okay, sir.
Uh, I think the first part you primarily asked me about how important it is to be aware. The
Yes.
second part of your question is about, in today's increasing social media and availability of information, let's put it that way.
Yes.
So today it's very easy to access information. In
Yes.
spite of that, maybe you have observed a lack of awareness amongst, it could be folks that you interact with or students that you interact with. So lack of
Okay. Yes.
awareness of, let's say,
Yes.
key topics, right?
Yes. 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 Yes.
And and what you're trying to ask me about is, how is it that I have gone about trying to educate myself, or uh,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
maybe be a bit aware of what are the current affairs and how things are going on in this world, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, sir.
So I would put it in, I would put it across in this way. Number one, importance of awareness. I would say it's extreme. There's a reason why in academic theory there is a period of enlightenment, and
Okay.
I mean there's a literal documented period of enlightenment
Okay.
amongst academics. And
Right.
the whole point of me making that statement is that it is associated with an increased awareness about questions.
Right.
So for us to make sense of what is it that we want to be aware about, I think it's important to step back and actually do some deep dive into our own selves.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, if I have I have an extreme interest in, assume I have an extreme interest in aerospace, I will seek
Okay.
out that information. And thankfully,
Right. Right.
it's easy to, as you said, access to information is no longer the problem. So,
Absolutely.
so the challenges are not outside, ourselves. The challenges are more internal. The challenges
Internal.
are
Correct.
the challenges are around attention and awareness.
Yes.
Right? Are we aware where we are spending our attention? Right? Social media has done one, I would say, thing for us where we are instantly gratified. Right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that is something that we should be aware that we shouldn't get conditioned by it. Everything is
True.
not
True.
spontaneous for us, right? Good things take time. A good building takes time.
Yeah.
It takes thought. So as far as importance of awareness goes, it's very, very important.
Okay.
As far as access to information and being, or rather, now the problem is actually different. The problem is of filtering. So
Right.
in order to filter effectively, it's important to understand what is it that we want to really get an information about. And for us to understand that, we have to understand ourselves. It's very important
Right.
for us to know thyself before you know your neighbor, right? So
Correct.
the third aspect, how do I try and keep up? I I have a system of consuming one-line news items, and I do it periodically throughout the day because I think I'm not able to dedicatedly read through large reams of news. But I
Correct. Correct.
make it a habit that I dedicatedly do some reading every day, which is of a book.
Yes.
So I read a lot. I like to think I read a lot, but I know there are much more voracious readers than me out there.
Right.
So I think books are a great way to. What I've always felt is when you read a book, it becomes a sense of meditation in itself because you're not doing anything else at that time.
Correct.
So that would be my advice of trying to improve your own knowledge and your understanding about how you interpret things.
Right. Right.
About these topics, and I actually prefer reading non-fiction more than fiction. So for
Okay.
me the breakdown of thoughts and ideas has come from some really famous people's thoughts and ideas themselves. So
Okay.
So I think that is a good habit to inculcate. There is extreme amount of knowledge available in books, and it comes to you slowly, so you're not conditioned
Yes.
for instantaneous gratification. Right?
Right. 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 Yeah.
So that's my process. I try and stay updated on current affairs with one-line tidbits. I'm also planning of setting up a quick RSS feed where I am able to shortlist things I want to read later.
Read
So
later. Yes.
we
Okay.
have to definitely, I think, work our own system out, and we cannot do without current affairs. But I think
Absolutely.
sometimes too much current affairs is also too much current, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that would be my take on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Good to hear about your reading patterns and how you go about it. I'm sure that's a big takeaway because I think most of the people at your in this kind of a stature, I've seen one thing I've seen common is they read, like they're aware of what's happening around, and they also have a dedicated reading habit.
Mhm.
And I hope that's a takeaway for our students too.
Yes, please read. Please read the inspiring leaders that you follow. If you are an architect, read about Lloyd. Read how he changed the face of architecture. It's fascinating. Read about Zara Hadid's life. Read. It's fascinating. It's I think better than a fictional story. Reality is immensely not joyful. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Thank you so much, and all the best to you.
Thanks, Glenn. Thanks. Lovely talking to you.
Yeah.
I think we are a little almost out of time, Dr. Nalini. I hope I was true to the session's
Yes, yes.
expectation.
Yes, yes, yeah. But if anyone else has any questions, I think you can take it. Anybody? Okay, so I call upon Dr. Gayatri to give a vote of thanks. Dr. Gayatri.
Yes. So good afternoon to one and all again. So I, Gayatri, Head of the Department of Planning, take a sincere pleasure to thank both the speakers and all the dignitaries during today's session. On behalf of Meter School of Architecture, Planning and Design and Management, a hearty gratitude to Dr. Lakshmi Jagannathan ma'am and Pranav Krishna sir for sharing and enlightening us with their knowledge, guiding us to building a systematic startup ecosystem. Special thanks of Education's Innovation Cell and AICT for their leadership and providing us with a great platform to build a culture of innovation, research and entrepreneurship. I take the opportunity to thank Dr. Chandran Rekha Jetti, our Director Principal of NIT SAPD and also the President of IIC for her visionary ideas, providing immense support to make the webinar successful. I extend my gratitude to Dr. Nalini, Professor and Research Head, and thank the IIC coordinators, especially Soumya, for organizing this webinar even amidst the pandemic. Lastly, I thank all the faculty members and students and the technical team for their active contribution by being there with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gayatri. I thank Dr. Lakshmi Jagannathan and Mr. Pranav Krishna. I also thank everyone for attending this webinar. With this, I finish the session. Thank you all once again.
Great.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.